Hello and welcome to ResearchPod. Thank you for listening and joining us today. In this episode, we look at the work of Professor Anne-Marie Walkowicz of Ohio's Central State University in the USA, who examines what Shakespeare's famous play, Henry V, tells us about theories of war in Elizabethan England. Walkowicz argues that the play explores the just war tradition, the counsel rulers should seek before engaging in military action, and class conflict. Henry V is one of the most popular plays by English dramatist William Shakespeare. Written around 1599 but set in 1415, it tells the story of how the English defeated the French against the odds at the Battle of Agincourt. So powerful has the drama come to be regarded, Laurence Olivier's film version was used to boost British morale in World War II. Its war imagery has also become part of everyday speech. Whether we talk about going once more into the breach, needing to summon up the blood, or fighting as a band of brothers, we are quoting from the play. Shakespeare portrays Henry V as a warrior king, but there's a deeper meaning to the play. In a recent paper, humanities professor Anne-Marie Walkowicz of Ohio's Central State University in the USA argues that the drama deconstructs the notion of war, in particular, the theory of just war. Not only does it critique the advice given to rulers before war is declared, it also considers what is gained and lost by everyone involved. It is a mark of Shakespeare's genius that, in addition to dramatizing the council of bishops and nobles who figure in the play's historical sources, he also portrays the views of common soldiers, whose lives and livelihoods are equally affected by war. For Walkowicz, Henry V is a lesson in class conflict. Just war theory can be traced back to classical times. Aristotle, for example, argued that war should only be declared as a last resort, for reasons of self-defense, and that it should be conducted ethically. Early Christian theorists like St. Augustine held that God allowed rulers to go to war if they had good cause, and that soldiers who killed in battle were not acting sinfully if rulers forced them to fight. Medieval thinkers like Thomas Aquinas elaborated the rules. Two important concepts were that rulers should seek counsel before taking military action, and that action should be in proportion to the economic and human losses that would arise. The aim was to protect the state from tyranny and ensure that rulers acted for the common good and not for personal glory. By the 15th and 16th centuries, humanist theologians such as Erasmus of Rotterdam had begun to question the just war tradition, and stressed that rulers were responsible for protecting their people's physical and economic well-being. Along with numerous manuals on warfare, pamphlets proposing pacifist views were circulating wildly at the time Shakespeare wrote his play, a time when England was again threatened by war at home and abroad. In Shakespeare's play, King Henry's bishops advise the king and his nobles that his royal lineage entitles him to the French throne. Military action to claim that right is therefore just. However, as the opening scene makes clear, the bishop's advice amounts to political maneuvering. They promote war to divert attention from parliamentary proposals to take away their church lands. It is King Henry, not the bishops, who shows concern for the loss of life and blood that war entails, blood that he describes as guiltless drops and every one a woe. Walkowicz argues that Shakespeare's extensive use of blood imagery helps to define the play's moral argument and exploration of class conflict. For example, while the bishops extol the king's aristocratic heritage and bloodlines, King Henry is concerned about his responsibility for the bloodshed of those lost in battle. As Walkowicz explains, counseling is a persuasive art where both sides balance political and personal affairs. While the king recognizes the cost of war, his nobles appeal to his aristocratic ideals of military honor and family duty, urging him to raise his bloody flag to become a warrior king. The imagery juxtaposes the blood of the fallen with the flag of imperial conquest, and ethical concerns about due proportion and the cost of human life are subsumed into the call for military action to reclaim previously held English lands in France. The practice of counsel therefore leads the king to legitimize his claims to France, and he chooses a war of expansion for political issues of succession. On the eve of the Battle of Agincourt, the disguised King Henry talks to his soldiers in their camp. Seeking backing for the king's cause, he receives another kind of counsel that rulers would not normally hear: the counsel of the common man and those who fight the king's war. The soldiers say they know that if the cause is wrong, God will absolve them of their sins, as they obeyed their ruler. However, God will not absolve the king. They also describe the impact that war has on the general populace and argue that it goes against Christian charity. Again, using the imagery of blood, they say that war amounts to soldiers giving their blood to preserve the bloodlines of noble families rather than the common good. King Henry diverts the debate away from moral issues of just cause and human loss to discuss the conduct of those involved in the prosecution of war. He describes the rape, pillage, and profiteering associated with war, arguing that such actions must be accounted for by the perpetrators, not the rulers who declare war. In his view, every subject's duty is the king's, but every subject's soul is his own. Walkowicz argues that the king's encounter with the soldiers provides a more intelligent critique of war than that provided by his bishops and nobles, one that helps him to better understand his responsibilities toward his subjects. Before the battle, the king prays that his soldiers will believe in the cause and have faith that God will not judge them for their actions. However, Henry also acknowledges his private fear that the war may not be just after all. As his father seized the throne from his uncle, he may not be the rightful king. Just as King Henry used the bishops' and nobles' council to manage public policy to gain political support for war at the beginning of the play, he uses plebeian counsel to inform his St. Crispin's Day speech and spur his troops on to battle. As Walkowicz argues, the first half of the speech addresses political considerations, saying that the war is motivated by honor rather than personal vanity or covetousness. In the second half, the king argues that he is but a man and seeks to persuade his soldiers that they fight together as a band of brothers, and that whoever sheds his blood will be his brother, regardless of his birth. It is one of the most famous battle speeches of all time, including the lines that St. Crispin's Day shall ne'er go by from this day to the ending of the world, but we in it shall be remembered. The irony is that when the king urges his troops to imagine the glory that follows victory and their pride at having secured it, the only names he mentions are those of the nobles: Bedford, Exeter, Talbot, Salisbury, and Gloucester. Despite his previous appeals to his band of brothers, it seems that the king has already forgotten the common soldier in favor of an inner circle of nobles linked by bloodlines, wealth, and reputation. King Henry wins the Battle of Agincourt, but the play's epilogue leaves no doubt that Shakespeare wants his audience to question the just cause of war and the cost of human life in the name of national glory. The chorus tells us that King Henry's victory was hollow, and that in the years that followed, his son Henry VI lost France and made England bleed. The imagery of blood again directs our attention to the impact of war and the socio-political realities of class. Walkowicz concludes, Henry V produces a sustained account of the interconnected issues of monarchical rule, just war, counsel, and class that bring out the disparity of what defined the best interests of the Commonwealth and the limitations of political leaders to act in service to the people's welfare. That's all for this episode. Thanks for listening. Links to the original research can be found in the show notes for this episode. And stay subscribed to ResearchPod for more of the latest science. See you again soon.